become a meme that the FBI, like
he was on our radar.
Yeah, he was on our radar. That's become a joke.
If you look at the terror cases that the FBI has been making, they almost 100% involve inserting an undercover and saying, "Oh, we can get access to weapons. We can get access." You know, we had a case in Boston, and NDA prohibited from going into details, but a guy who was going to attack the Pentagon. He actually went to high school with a woman who worked for me, who's now a special agent in Boston. He was going to use model airplanes and attach explosives to them and fly them into the Pentagon. And I can't remember the guy's name, and I probably shouldn't say it out loud anyway. He's in jail today. This guy couldn't back a car down the driveway, let alone build the kind of model airplane sizes, acquire those. He didn't have the finances. He didn't have the training. But in comes the FBI, and we'll just move this guy along into an operational level. Now, Kyle had brought up earlier about what is it? Operation, what was it, Kyle?
Operation Flex.
Flex.
Is this the guy that I'm looking at here? It says Massachusetts man charged with plotting attack on Pentagon and U.S. Capitol, attempting to provide material support of TOs. 2011, just so people can get the time frame on it.
So
his name's out there in the public.
So
Firdaus,
yes. So if we had a better relationship with the Islamic community, we would take people like Firdaus and have them get exposure to the kind of person that I had exposure to, an Islamic scholar who can actually explain the faith to them. But instead, the FBI sees it as an opportunity to claim a stat, to claim more funding, to claim more usurpations of people's constitutional rights. And we see this exclusively in the news coming out every day. And it's almost at a point where they don't make any effort to hide it. Like, oh, we had a UC here, we had this covered, blah, 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 blah. I mean, when have we seen a terrorist attack disrupted because of a FISA? Never. It's always been after the fact, but yet we continue to renew it.
It's become a meme that the FBI, like
he was on our radar.
Yeah, he was on our radar. That's become a joke now.
That's essentially meaningless. Look, right out, I'm looking at this press release because it's always in these things. This is what I do now instinctively, and I'll teach the audience to do the same thing. When you see the concept, the FBI used an undercover operation to conduct this investigation. Undercover operations are used to combat all kinds of crimes and criminals, including counterterrorism. When you see that they flagged that there was a UC involved, okay, and the FBI has two ways that they can move people in. You always hear the word Fed. In fact, I hear it all the time. Yeah. Now I walk down the airline aisles, and on the left-hand side, it says 11, 12, 13, and it says FED for the seat numbers. And I'm like, come on, give me a break. No, but the idea that everybody is a Fed, we have to be really specific. Some of them are called confidential human sources. That's what the Bureau uses for source work.
Which is what they were talking about. They were talking about those were confidential human informants. They were on the ground on January 6th.
They were, but I'll get real specific about it because that OIG report said a lot of things and it didn't say a lot of things, and most people didn't read the right stuff, especially people that don't know what the FBI means. CHS is a very specific type of person. That's your informant that most people are familiar with.
They get paid.
Undercover, UC. That's another thing. That's an FBI agent working in an undercover role. It's usually nominally backstop. Some of them do long-term, but a lot of them are just like for operation only. It's like, hey, Phil, I'm going to need you over here. We're going to send you up to Portland. You're going to go meet some people, grow your beard out a little bit. You're going to go talk to them. You're there for a couple of months, and then you're out. It's not like you live in the thing like they were doing long-term infills in the mafia. They don't do that as much anymore. Okay, but here's the wild piece. That's UC. That's a brand name. Imagine that as saying like, oh, did you have any soldiers there? And you're like, there were no infantrymen there at all. Yep. And you're like, well, what about guys from the mortar platoon? Like, what about dudes that were in armor? Yep. So we're saying one thing. They said there were no UCs involved in the crowd, but that didn't mean that there weren't plainclothes FBI agents.
Yep.
I walked around in crowds all the time in my job. I was a surveillance guy. On purpose, I would walk like this, okay? I wasn't undercover. The FBI would say we had no UCs in there, but Kyle Seraphin was one of our agents and he was plainclothes. Yeah. They said things without saying things when you read that OIG report about J6. But this gets to a very specific point. When we're talking about undercover operations, I call it the playbook. My buddies and I have kind of just made this as a joke. If people want to read a good book on it by someone on the political left, by the way, it's Trevor Aronson. You go read the book. It's called The Terror Factory. My folks that did surveillance on CT targets, counterterrorism, said this is mandatory reading because this is what the FBI does. It's very, very simple. George can back this up on as well. We find somebody on the internet. You're on a Reddit chat group. You're on a comments. You're on a regular podcast, and you always say the same things. You have the dumbest, most violent ideas in the group. The FBI is going to come and make friends with you. You're a person who doesn't have a lot of friends in real life, let's say. They are going to help you do your dumbest, most dangerous, most violent ideas. For the exact amount of money that you have, that person is a Fed. Now, they're going to be a CHS. They're going to be an undercover. They could be various things. They have a thing called a UCE. That's an or an OCE. It's an online covert employee. So they can do that. They don't have to even be an agent. They will set you up with the thing you need. They will hook you up with people in real life. You will meet IRL. You'll get to go out there and do the thing that you need to do. You're going to get fake explosives. You're going to get a gun that has no firing pin. You're going to go out there. The minute you touch it, you're going to jail for 20 to life. So this is a playbook that they exercise. The problem with intelligence, and I've noticed that we've got kind of our thing, like what's the threat? We've got Sarah Adams talking about invisible bombs, people that are wearing, bombs that they can make it through a metal detector. We're hearing all these claims. We don't have good intelligence overseas. We betrayed our allies over there by pulling out of Afghanistan. So the Afghan source network disappeared. People who saw what happened to the sources in Afghanistan that got killed off, they don't want to be part of us either. So we lose intelligence in all of the places where we used to have visibility. We screwed it up domestically because we've done things like piss off the Muslim community starting back in 06, 07, 08. They've gone through and the Supreme Court said, yeah, they can do that. So you've burned your domestic route that's going to maybe flag extremism. Flag terrorists that are domestically locating that don't like the United States. So your HVE visibility goes down. So now you start flying blind, and then we brought in 10 million people or however many. We know 100,000 Afghans. We know however many came over the southern border.
Million.
Look, if you can smuggle a person, you can smuggle all kinds of things. There have been stories about whether or not they were, manpower, like man-pads, and they had, surface-to-air missile capabilities. Is that a possibility? Of course. Because you can, a human being, if you can move up like a trailer full of human beings, what can you fit in a cargo trailer?
Yep.
How many do you have to move across the border to not get caught? If we catch, they say they catch 30% at best. So 60%, 70% are running through. That's where the real threat comes in. 30%. And we're running blind. We're running blind on this stuff. So the intelligence failure is one thing. The fact that the FBI is interested in going after this setup job, which is what they are. And again, it's a terror factory. It's a numbers game. George can break down what IPM is. Everybody thinks it's because they're looking at one thing because they think a lot of things, but they don't know what it is. They think they're going after all these folks because it's about ideology. Oh, we're going to get the right-wing extremists. We're going to get Kyle because he's got an AR-15 on his shirt. That's the guy. We're going to go knock them down. We're going to get the MAGA people. Mm-hmm. This is not where the threat, and that's not why they're going after them. They're going after the low-hanging fruit because of a thing called IPM, which is the most bureaucratic and lame way of anything done, but it's perfect government if you want to break it down because people should know.
George.
I'll try to make it. I'm going to break it down Marine Corps style, just crayon eating, jarhead. It is a system that was developed by McKinsey and Company that was brought in by Bob Mueller. He first tried to emulate what New York was doing. All these shenanigans started right after 9/11. So they decided that, okay, how are we going to determine whether or not we're really doing our job to keep the country safe? So the FBI determined these are the performance metrics we determine. These are the performance metrics that we say that we're going to hit in order to reduce crime and reduce terrorism. So if we were all sitting in a room at headquarters and we would just say, hey, Phil, what do you think? How many FISAs do you think we need to have in order to mitigate the threat from Iranian-based terrorist groups? We had 3 last year, right? You think we can do 4 this year? Yeah, I think we can do 4. I think we can do that, right? So, how many UCs do we need? Well, we only had 2 last year, and that was tough. I don't think we can get more than 2. Well, George, how many Intel products do you think we can write on this? That's easy. We have access to data warehouse now. We can write Intel products all day long. All right, good. We're going to put you down for 15. Not a problem, boss. We can do easy. So we set out these metrics at the beginning of the year, and then we exceed them at the end of the year because we decide what's a stat and what's not a stat. And we hand out awards and promotions. So
there's one more piece to it.
But wait,
your bonus structure is going to be relevant. It's going to be related to how many of those metrics that you forecasted at the beginning of the year. It's going to be how much you get. And those bonuses are like 5 figures. They're, $25, $30 to $50,000, whatever it may be, depending at the level of SES. So this is your quote unquote deep state, your administrative state.
Yep.
These are the people that run field offices. For their success, They negotiate a process. Because let's say I'm in the field office and George is saying, hey, we need 15 Intel products. And I take it to my Intel shop and I go, hey, can we do 15? And they're like, oh man, we just lost 3 people and we're in the middle of a hiring. We can only do 13. So I come back and say 13 and they go, how about 14? And we settle on 14. Yeah. Then I'm going to go get 14. That's literally how crazy this is. And then as long as I get those 14 as the executive over here, I'm getting paid.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Culture War podcast. We're live every Friday, 10 a.m. to noon. So subscribe and come hang out.